Sunday, 4th August 2024, the last day of a fortnight off work, I decided to take a long walk. Nothing close to my recent trips to York and around the M60. This would be around 10, 11 hours to Thelwall across Latchford Locks and home via the Transpennine Trail and Bridgewater Canal. It was also the day after racists rioted again across the country. Just like QAnon and its offshoots, just like the most committed anti-trans activists, these white thugs used protecting children as a fig leaf for their hatred and far-right extremism. It was dispiriting to see. For those who don't know or don't remember, a teenage boy born in Cardiff to Christian parents was arrested after a knife attack on a children's yoga and dance workshop in Southport, Merseyside, which killed 3 girls and injured several more. Various far-right grifters took the opportunity to spread anti-Islamic and anti-immigrant lies, leading to riots across the country over a number of days. But back to the walk. The walk took me out through Trafford to Earlham Locks, over them and along Cadishead Way. The weather was cloudy and warm with light rain until shortly after 1. Cadishead Way is busy, noisy and unpleasant to walk along. However, it allows me to join the Mersey some way before the Thelwall Viaduct and follow the river into Thelwall. I wasn't there yet though. For the moment, at 1:30, 3 hours into the walk, I was close to Cadishead. The footway was wide with grass verges and flowers. Trees on the left over the road hid the Mersey. I passed fewer people cycling, walking than I'd usually expect on this section. The sun tried to come out. Through gaps in trees, swans drifted on the river. On my right, lorries and other large vehicles banged and rattled in industrial sites. Old anti-lockdown stickers lingered on bins and lampposts. Dust, dirt, litter, long-dried grass mown and scattered, twigs and more gathered in ridges at the edge of the pavement. Later, near the turn for Glazebrook and Colchester, comically but dangerously narrow painted cycle gutters came and went. After the junction, for a time there's no footway along what has become Manchester Road. Instead, you leave that road for a few minutes to go through the village of Hollins Green, which is what I did now. All too soon I was leaving the village and back on the trunk road. This was bad for reasons already outlined: busy, noisy, unpleasant to walk along, and for other reasons I'll elucidate in a minute. But it was good because I was getting closer to the end of this atrocious section. A good 40 minutes of it remained, but I knew it was coming. I also knew it was coming before that. The road and footway narrowed, cars and trucks rushed by, hedges encroached on the footway. A good half of the pavement unavailable due to 3 or more centimetres thickness of compacted road dirt in which grass, ivy and other wild plants had taken root. This went on for some time and always felt unsafe. Through the hawthorn hedge grew nettles, dock, ragwort, blackberry brambles with berries. Then, for a time, I could leave the road again for some of the footpaths around Rixton clay pits. Only for a few minutes, but better than nothing. Rejoining the road, the pavement was a little wider, if still narrow, and the place I'd leave the road much closer. The speed limit remained 50 miles an hour. Over the road, fields of crops alternated with fields of sheep. Every so often, when a truck or car towing a caravan past, I'd stop and tuck into the side of the footway as best I could until it and the gust of air that followed it were gone. Nearer and nearer, past the greenhouses with the old and I assume non-functional light aircraft sat outside. The pavement narrowed dangerously again, but with a temporary lull in traffic, I was able to hop briefly in the road to let a runner go by in the opposite direction. Past the garden centre and some houses, the Mersey was out of sight, low beyond fields over the road on the left. Nearer, though. At last, fences, hedges, houses fell away on my right and were succeeded by a recently harvested field. These were the final few 100 metres. Ahead, just on a bend, but with clear views for a long way in each direction, I scampered over the road for the footpath to the Mersey and onto Thelwall. At the river were blackberries, Himalayan balsam, nettles, trees, ivy, more. The start of an area for fishing with a licence. Mallards and swans on the water, bracken, streams that usually cascade to the river currently dry. Out from under trees to a field where geese crossed into the river. Cormorants dived. A dog, with a solitary fisherman, barked at its own echo returning from across the water. Crickets chirred. The footpath ran right at the edge of a cereal field for a time. A constant rattling and cracking sound came from the field, whether made by the crop or insects, I couldn't tell. The sun was out and the clouds high. Close ahead, the Thelwall viaduct. Grasses and other plants on both sides reached over my head. I was troubled by the riots and my inaction. I'm not really an activist. I don't do much for the community. I argue with fascists and transphobes online for the little it's worth. There's barely any explicit politics in my art. And in their past, when there was more, it was clumsy, obvious and shallow. The footpath now was fenced off to the right. First past boggy ground, then trees, then fields with horses. The viaduct roared with traffic behind. Insect bites and nettle stings itched. Swans looked at me and drifted on. There were houses now, the path no longer a packed earth trail but gravelled and broad. High banks rose on the other side of the river. Beyond a gate and what used to be Woolston Wharf was a footbridge over the Mersey. Downstream the river dropped over Woolston Weir. Over the footbridge the path climbed and wound high, overhung with greenery on all sides. It levelled off and continued for several minutes before dropping again. As I expected, so close to Warrington on a Sunday afternoon in summer, I saw a few people walking, with or without dogs. Before Warrington, the Mersey splits into two channels. Having crossed the northernmost of those, the path dropped alongside the southern channel on my left. The track widened into one also used by cars, though it's rare that I've been passed by one. I take this route quite frequently. I think this was my 4th time doing the walk this year. After the first 4 hours, or however long it takes to reach the footpath, it's a lovely walk to Latchford Locks and then back to Manchester. The wide track continues a long way, trees to left and right. Bees barreled from buddleia to teasels, birds sang, honeysuckle fought for space. I checked the news and saw more far-right trouble in Rotherham, Middlesbrough, Bolton. Again, I was infuriated. The path reached a gate and became a road, at first by a trading estate. It's rarely busy at the times I'm usually here, mid-afternoon on weekends. After the trading estate were houses. In just a couple of minutes I turned left and onto Latchford Locks, over the southern channel of the Mersey. High bridges over the river, downstream. I was more than halfway through the walk in terms of time, and about to turn for home. Just 2 short stretches of road and onto the Transpennine Trail. Uphill from the road until it levelled off, all under trees. A broad bridle way. Smoke from a barbecue on one side or the other misted the tree canopy early on. Although there were houses on either side, they were below the level of the path, and trees arching over insulated me. It was like walking a long green cloister. Horses, chickens, and llamas wandered slowly in a field. It started to rain, though few drops made it through the trees. If the rain were to continue until I was on the canal and less sheltered, I had an umbrella. While there were people travelling east and west, like the whole of the walk so far, there were fewer than I'd expected. Perhaps they were indoors watching the Olympics. I wasn't complaining. I like when places aren't too crowded. Joining the Bridgewater Canal, it was still raining. Not heavily, but enough for me to temporarily pocket my notebook. Had my waterproof notebook not been full and the waterproof pen not broken, I wouldn't have bothered. Before the rain stopped near Lim Marina, I saw a heron preening itself on a short, pale blue wooden arched bridge. Another heron also preening itself on the rear of a narrowboat. Dogs swimming in the canal. 2 swans and 6 large cygnets on the water. Swallows and swifts diving and darting, and a third heron fishing. At the marina, the landscape broadened. Horizons receded, flat almost as far as I could see. The third heron continued to sometimes follow, sometimes precede me down the towpath, always seeming unbothered whenever I walked past. Planes departed Manchester Airport below the clouds. I reflected, as I often do, that it seems like most of the canal between Thelwall Viaduct and Altrincham is somehow Lim, even when it can't possibly be. Fields of maize, fields of cows, empty fields of grass, moorhens and their small fuzzy chicks, narrowboats moored silently, lily pads, doves, red brick farmhouses, electricity pylons, gulls, molehills, infrequent cyclists. The moan of tyres on roads formed parts of the landscape. Oak trees, brambles, crows, periodically checking the news. Fascists and racists still being treated too kindly by the media. Any of the anti-immigration protesters or those claiming to be concerned about the children who, when interviewed, claimed to be surprised by the violence or said it didn't represent them, struck me as oblivious, naive, or mendacious. The River Bollin, channeled below the canal, and Dunham Massey were a checkpoint on the way home. Trees closed in again. I decided now to get the tram back from Altrincham to be home a little sooner so I could get on with typing up the account of my M60 walk sooner. Different herons continued to walk and fly up and down the towpath. Fields of cereal were interspersed with houses, fields of grass and woods as the edge of Altrincham approaches. The Transpennine Trail to my left grew closer, within sight of the canal. Dragonflies appeared for the first time. Bridges over the canal, a playing field on the other side of the water, and I was moving into Altrincham. A half-sunk cruiser moored behind a house. A man fishing. A young couple walking the other way, moorings, and at the end of one wooden walkway between moored boats, another heron. This was the long walk to the road bridge where I'd leave the canal and head into town for the metro link. A clutter of bikes, a motorcycle frame, metal bars, the remains of a folding chair marked where someone had been magnet fishing. Past canal-side apartments and an office block, under the road bridge, left through a car park for shoppers, left again to the road and the bridge over the canal. A building, including a job centre, had dozens of cycle racks. A care worker left a care home briskly after her shift and went to the nearest bus stop going her way. The Altrincham Garrick Playhouse advertised a production of The History Boys. Just How many Garrick playhouses, theatres, are there in the UK? And why are seemingly so many more named for David Garrick than any other actor or playwright? I reached Altrincham interchange right on time for the tram after 25 to 8. This would save me more than an hour. Navigation Road, Timperley, Brooklands, Sale, Dane Road, Stretford, Old Trafford, then Trafford Bar, where I left the tram 20 minutes later. Palestinian flags hung from apartment windows. 4 former office blocks, all converted to apartments. Through Seymour Park to Ayres Road. In the park, smoke drifted from barbecues as it had earlier in Thelwall. Ayres Road has been familiar to me for a couple of decades, since it was part of my walk to work when I was at HSE in one of those now converted office buildings. Just before I turned off Ayres Road, I saw through a window someone watching Skibidi Toilet on a large TV screen. YouTube breaking containment. Down an alley onto St John's Road to Upper Chorlton Road and nearly home. My last few hours of freedom before getting back to work the following day. Apart from disturbances in Ireland, rumours of future riots and some small confrontations in the next week, the previous day was for the time being the end of this large-scale uptick in racist violence. An uptick fueled by a decade of nativist rhetoric around immigration and an emboldened, stochastic, right-wing griftosphere polluting public discourse. And none of this has gone away. The racism lingers, and there seems to be no willingness to really challenge the causes or the media and social media outlets signal boosting the same voices that helped lead to the recent riots. This was one of the major things running through my head throughout the walk. Just like how early on I thought a lot about roads, the ways in which we remain bound to cars as the primary mode of transport, while rail and cycling are neglected and walking not considered at all. Even these obvious observations have been caught up in a culture war conspiracy theories around 15-minute cities, linking them to a floridly fictional version of the World Economic Forum. Walkable neighbourhoods with shops and services within easy reach shouldn't be a contentious proposition. And then there are any number of stray thoughts that float through my head. Usually for such a short time I never note them down. Then the walk itself, the route that I take, the things I see along the way, the things that are important to me. Despite news of the riots, despite the roads, I enjoyed the walk, I always do. There wasn't even any of that sadness and regret that often accompanies the end of a holiday. A sadness and regret I first experienced as a child on the car journeys home from my paternal grandparents, watching streetlights recede behind. Despite the long drag of ugly and sometimes dangerous roads right at the beginning, the majority of the walk is off-road along river and canal. It's lovely to walk, especially in summer with the profusion of greenery and flowers, dragonflies and other insects and animals enjoying the sun.